what medical products and procedures you think are likely to be impacted by the UK's departure from the Euratom Treaty, and at the same time whether you can give us a sense of the size and scope of the UK's reliance on medical radioisotopes and the importance of those procedures and treatments for patients and for medical research. So it's a general question and a slightly more specific one. Who'd like to go first?
As the general nuclear medicine physician, I'll start off.
Okay.
We use medical radioactive isotopes for a range of diagnostic tests. I suppose the most commonly understood one is in cancer, but we also deal with a lot of very significant non-cancer conditions as well: heart disease, kidney disease, bone disease. From our survey in the British Nuclear Medicine Society, we think they do around about 700,000 patients a year. However, we know that we underreport the number of studies, so it's probably closer to the million across the United Kingdom, and that's in all the nations of the United Kingdom. We also have a significant therapeutic arm using unsealed sources, so this includes, for example, iridium-131 for thyroid diseases, and new treatments like radium for the metastasis of bone metastasis from prostate cancer, and a new treatment called Luthera, which is to treat a rare condition called neuroendocrine tumour, but it's almost the only effective treatment for that condition. Around about 80% of these radioisotopes are imported from from outside the UK, the majority from the European Union, but not exclusively so. We have some imports from Australia, South Africa, and also from the United States. Some products are made here in the UK. We do actually have a significant radiopharmaceutical company in the United Kingdom. They don't produce the base radioactive products. They do a lot of the processing and then exporting of those products.
Exporting?
Oh yes, we export as well. The company used to be the Radiochemical Centre, then it became Amersham. It's now GE Healthcare and is a major exporter of radioisotopic products. So what tends to happen across the world is that different countries produce different products which are then sold worldwide, because obviously setting up the production when you're using things like reactors and cyclotrons is very expensive. So there tends to be a sort of dovetailing of work across the whole of the world. So the world works as one sort of cooperative group, and then Europe works as a closer cooperative group.
But the products that we export, do they have the same kind of problems of a very short half-life, which means that they have to be...
Absolutely, exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same. So we have an importation which for our patients, but obviously export would affect patients in other parts of Europe and other parts of the world. Though obviously, if their countries are outside Euratom, I understand that it may be less complex, but still there needs to be arrangements to enable that to happen, because
we'll come to that later. I expect to go through.
So I think probably about 1 million patients are affected within the United Kingdom each year.
Thank you. Please.
I'll talk a little bit about research. I'm co-chair of the BMA's Medical Academic Staff Committee, so we're very concerned with research. And research is very important to the UK. Euratom is a major contributor to the Horizon 2020 programme, and the UK has benefited to about £32 million for nuclear research under that programme. And the wider aspects of research into the nuclear industry are very important. My own university, for instance, has just established a new nuclear research centre with a grant which is partly from Welsh Government and partly from the EU, which is worth £6 million. And locally, of course, we're very interested in the development of the Wilfer new nuclear power station. But in terms of research generally, cooperation with Euratom and cooperation with the various programmes is very important to universities. It's very important to medical research. My colleagues can probably talk a little bit more about that, but a developing area of medical research is neurochemistry and immunotreatments involving isotopes of cancers. So it's a very important area that we have to maintain.
And do you, perhaps you'll come to, but do you feel that the research, I'm not talking here about the medical isotopes, but actually the research is threatened by our leaving Euratom? Is that a worry to you and your colleagues?
Oh, it's a significant worry to us, because if one takes it together with the EU research programs, there isn't another research funding organisation like it. So universities are a net beneficiary of money that we put into the EU for research, and a great deal of UK-based research is dependent on those types of programs, and also on importing expertise. So in our own university we're going to bring in nuclear scientists, and we have to make sure there's a free exchange and ability for those scientists to come and work here.
Thank you. Dr. Dixon.
Yeah, I think the diagnostic use of radioisotopes has been touched on, so I'll touch on a bit about the therapeutic use, especially when you come to malignant diseases. Certainly for cancer of the cervix, iridium is a radioactive isotope that we use for delivering brachytherapy, which is a type of radiation which is delivered internal to the patient. So cancer of the cervix is pretty much dependent on that for a cure in combination with other types of radiotherapy. So cancer of the cervix is a relatively rare cancer, 3,500 patients a year, but about half of those require brachytherapy, and they require the whole treatment to be delivered in no greater than 42 days, so there is that time pressure, or the cure rates reduce. In terms of other radioisotopes, again, for brachytherapy for prostate cancer, we use an iodine-125 isotope, which is inserted into the patient on a permanent basis. There's about 500 procedures done in the UK, roughly. Difficult to be absolutely precise about the reporting of that. Per
500 a year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be patients who would otherwise go for surgery with a different set of side effects, or who are unsuitable for surgery, who would have to have other treatment, which has different side effects. Same with slightly more advanced prostate cancer. The iridium isotope I spoke about is often used as a boost to external beam treatment, or used on its own, rather than giving external treatment. It's given internally, but in a temporary fashion. Again, the use of that is significantly increasing, but at the present time there's about 500 patients per year in the UK.
The system which you described at the moment, the design of the system, is that kind of Euratom responsibility in some way, or does our membership of Euratom give us a sort of sense, a say in the design of the system, which we wouldn't have when we're outside?
Yes, I mean the Euratom Treaty and the Atomic Supply Agency has a European observatory which tends to oversee this and is working towards seamless supply. So one of the things that observatory does is to monitor the supply of isotopes and to try and make sure it's written into their to their purpose is to make sure that there is a seamless supply of isotopes. So if we come out and we're not associated with that observatory and not associated with the European Supply Agency, then we are a third country and a third party, and the future as far as that type of safeguard is somewhat unknown.
And of course it will affect our industry who makes these products exporting as well. So we employ very well paid and very well qualified scientists and producing agents in GE Healthcare in Buckinghamshire. They will be affected by this whole, because they're going to make it more difficult for them to compete and export into Europe. So we also, and that would mean that if they feel that they're unable to do that, and they feel that they would rather do that within Europe, for example, our last sort of home production would also go. So it would probably mean that most of our isotopes that we use, except for some that we can make locally, will now have to be imported. So there are wheels within wheels, as I said, across different sort of departments, which makes it very difficult to get a unified idea of what's actually going to happen.
Overall then, what are the implications for hospitals and for our patients currently if we experience a disruption of radioisotopes? We've already seen evidence of this in 2008-9 when it happened, and we were able to deal with that, even though it did affect patient care.
Well, one of the reasons we could deal with it, because we knew that it was time limited, so we could prioritise patients who needed scans done now, and we could delay patients who could be delayed, although it was obviously inconvenient. So we had to make a clinical choice because we knew there was an end to the problem. Obviously, this will not have an end, so we would need to look at it. I think the problem is the security of supply. So certainly we have had problems with product coming in from, particularly from places like Canada, where they just haven't turned up, or they've been delayed, or there's been a problem with paperwork, and they just don't turn up at the hospital. So you end up with a patient who's ready for treatment, who may be occupying a bed, and as you all know, beds in the NHS are precious objects to have, and you can't treat them, or you can't scan them. So they need to be rebooked, and because of the fact that the stuff has actually decayed whilst it's waiting for you to be delivered, you can't use it again. You have to order a whole new order that can take 2 weeks to produce. So, you know, patients' treatments can be significantly delayed, and I'm sure it won't happen for everybody, but the possibility of that happening increases if we have to have things going through borders and custom checks, etc. So it just adds as a complication. And I said, we're often pretty good at being pragmatic, but it will just mean that probably more patients will end up being delayed with scans and treatments than at present. And obviously that, you know, that adds to the cost as well. So we're also very acutely aware that we need to be really cost efficient in everything we do in the NHS. And we do something which will add cost for no additional outcome is something that we really would like to try and avoid if we can.
I think also when you're talking about... Sorry. I think when you're talking about patients being delayed and things like that, most of the time you can deliver another investigation to take the role of the thing. Not always, and not always as effectively, but the workforce we have at the moment is that most of those tests would be done by radiologists. The workforce in radiology is under severe crisis at the moment. There's lots of vacancies. There's a lot of backlog. So again, releasing the capacity for those tests is not an immediate thing. It's not that you can take a workforce who are doing nothing because they've not had something delivered. Apologies, but you're not doing nothing. And then switch them to doing something else. The two parts of the workforce are very different. So there's the nimbleness to be able to substitute immediately, and again, for radiotherapy, especially for prostate cancer, you can do other things with those patients. You can treat them in another way, but that has a knock-on capacity. If you're using only the internal brachytherapy treatment, that's a one-day treatment. If you're using an external beam treatment, that's somewhere between 20 and 40 days worth of treatment on a radiotherapy machine. The capacity, the nimbleness of capacity is not there to switch immediately, or is stretched to do that. And certainly for things like cervical cancer, you would have if you have an interrupted supply of iridium, you are significantly diminishing patients' chances of a cure.
Sorry, if you want to come in.
Well, I was only just going to pick up the issue about workforce, because the nuclear medicine workforce in this country is particularly dependent on EU doctors. I think about 30% of our workforce in nuclear medicine is from the EU. And the BMA last week did a survey of doctors who were EU nationals to look at their intentions. And 18% of them are intending to leave, 45% are thinking about it. And if things went badly, we would lose a lot more. So I think there is an important aspect of looking at our workforce, reassuring them, and making sure that we don't inadvertently lose a particularly vulnerable group of doctors who take a long time to train and are in short supply.